Welcome and good evening to the September 3rd, 2013 Board of Education meeting. We were just in executive session discussing contractual issues. After we complete the open session, we will be going back into executive session to continue our discussions. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Also, just to remind everybody, we are being videotaped. Now we'll do introductions.
Lynn Lombard.
Kate Navarro.
Joanne Cunningham.
Jody Monroe.
Tom Douglas.
Matt Downey.
Michael Cooper.
Diane Stever.
Charmaine Ridgesinger.
And Judy Keyhall.
Moving on, item number 2, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the August 14th?
One change.
Oh, you didn't move first.
Yeah, let me just,
So
okay.
moved.
Second.
okay. Any discussion?
Just one change, if I could be referred to as Ms. Cunningham, not Mrs., who is my mother, I would appreciate it.
So noted. And Michelle will note that
Takes
for the future,
a
too.
little adjustment for that part.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
Any other discussion?
I am not my mother.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can get follow into that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item number 3, Student Senate report. Doesn't look like we have one tonight. Item number 4, Superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you, President Downey. Gives me great pleasure that we opened our schools for our faculty and staff today with a breakfast as well as an opening, of which our president gave a welcome, as well as I gave the opening address, and also assisted by my wonderful assistant, Jody Monroe, helping to introduce our new staff. In general, we are starting to tour the district and make sure that we're ready to go for the opening on the 9th, as this is sort of unusual, but we are trying to make sure that it goes as seamlessly and smooth as possible as we go throughout the next week and a half, especially with transportation and everything, as this will be our second year. In general, our enrollments are being pretty much within projections, and we look forward to opening and working with the new Common Core and really trying to just focus this year on embedding ourselves within the Common Core for excellent outcomes in the future. So at that point, I'll make a further opening remarks at the 18th after we have students back, so it's a little different this year. So thank you, and that concludes my report for right now.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Next item, Board of Education report.
I'll just say that it was great after it seems like many years, having a new teacher's orientation. It used to be a big thing. We used to have lots of new teachers. And the past couple of years, we had gone in the opposite direction. So it was really great this year to have an opening session. And you guys did a great job introducing the new staff, and they seem very enthusiastic. I know it's difficult, some of them are only part-time, but hopefully something will materialize for them to be full-time. Same thing with this morning, it was exciting to see all the staff in. You know, it was very hot on the building, but, and uncomfortable. But it seemed like people were happy to be back and talking and whatever. And you know, great introductions to the staff and their years of service. The people that had, you know, reached certain points, 25, 30, what is it, 20, 25, 30 years?
25, 30,
30 and
35.
35 years of service. So it was great to recognize them, too.
Anybody else?
Just my apologies to the faculty and staff. This morning I was taken unexpectedly ill, so I missed the opening. I heard it went very well. Also, my son joined the Hooligans, so which is the band, not a group of hooligans. And so I was on the soccer field this afternoon just to see them at the varsity soccer game, and on the way to that game I saw several teams out enjoying the day in the field. So it was great to see so many young people and their families out on the athletic fields today. And I believe it's Mr. Fisk, who leads the Hooligans, was out there with a lot of enthusiasm leading the group. So I think we're off to a good fall sports schedule and practices and games. It was very enjoyable. So.
And again, I would like to just add, I think it was a great event this morning. I think the faculty and staff and administration were all engaged. And had a chance to come back for the lunch, and what I noticed too was the freshman orientation going on. And I thank the upperclassmen who did the tour guides for them and made it look like it was, they were well engaging the freshmen coming in, so. All right, presentations. We have an APPR report. Jody?
I'm going to ignore Mr. Knowles' comments about the reason there are so few people here is because of this report. Notice the beautiful scenery.
Yeah, I thought this was great.
You like
Great
that?
background, yeah.
Oops, now it's just gone. So, last year, if you remember, I presented the APPR kind of in its entirety, and tonight what I'm going to do is just highlight the changes that we've made going forward. Okay, so if you recall, last year, the APPR was 60% from observations and evaluations, and there were two different scores for the state learning objective and the local measure. There was some teachers who were going to get 25%, and other teachers who were going to get 20% for the state learning objective, and then the remaining local measure would be broken down 15 and 20% for those teachers. The state has since backed off that value-added model, and so this year all teachers will be receiving the same percentage points. So there'll be 60% from observations, 20% from the either state-assigned growth measure or the student learning objectives that teachers have to write themselves, and then all teachers will be getting 20% for the local measure. So the local measure, last year what we did is we used individual student scores for a local measure, and they were pretty much done through a mid-course assessment, whether that be 10 weeks, 20 weeks, or full year. The problem we had last year, and I'm sure many of you heard about this, is the excessive testing our students were going through. We had pre-test, mid-course assessments. If you think about 10-week courses at the middle school, kids were being tested at the very beginning, the midpoint, and the end in order to get these measures. So this year what we're going to do is all teachers will get a building score. And what we'll use for that, and I'll show you the charts after I present this, is at the high school we'll take an aggregate of the 5 required Regents exams, have an average, and we have a scale based on the past 4 years of test data. Any teacher who works at the high school will get that score. If a teacher is between 2 buildings, they'll get a weighted average. Let's say they're between the middle and high school, they'll get a score from the middle school, a score from the high school, which will be then averaged together to get a total score. At the middle school and elementary schools, we're going to use the state science exams in 4 and 8 and the ELA and math exams that are administered by the state. So all the teachers will, it kind of will balance things out, because obviously, I think I mentioned this last year, when you have some teachers under, they're getting measures from the state on 4 through 8 assessments, and other teachers writing their own assessments, there's a lot of inequity in those scores. So this, for the local measure, helps balance that out and gives a little more reliability to, if you're a high school teacher, this is what your building score looks like, and you get that for your APP, as part of your APPR score.
Jody, before you, can I ask a quick question on
Sure.
the high school one? I just want to make sure I understand that. So regardless of your content area, you take the 5 Regents exams, and
Correct.
my score is based off of those 5?
Correct.
Regardless of my content area?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, so every teacher gets the same score?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The student learning objectives, the biggest change this year is there will be no pre-tests, which is, again, we just found that the information we got from those was not all that helpful for instruction. And we've used this, we based our targets that we set on our scales based on 4 years of past test data for both the high school. I had done it for the middle school and elementary, however, with all the new test scales, those measures don't apply, so I had to use just this year's as our baseline. which is essentially what the state does in the 4 through 8 teachers who get those state growth measures. They use the prior year test data to set a target for the next year's assessment, which is how they get the growth scores for the teachers. So this essentially is taking that same model and applying that to all of our faculty. And the other big change is last year we did not allow tests to be modified for special education students because we are modeling our assessments after the state assessments, which are not allowed to be modified, except for modifications that would typically be allowed. This year, however, because of some of the disparity we saw in the scoring and, setting those students really up for failure, if students do have modified assessments on their IEP, for example, in our Excel classes or our co-taught classes, those assessments will be modified and they'll be scored on the same scale as everyone else. The belief being that if they're giving a modified assessment that's appropriate, those scales should still work for those students. Before I go to questions, why don't I bring up the scales so I can show you what they look like? Okay, so this is the local scoring template for the high school, and this is what all teachers across the district will be using if they're writing their own assessments at the end of the year. So what you have is they will do, let's take a class where they give a final exam. They'll take the average of all of their students. In those scales you see up there, 98 to 100, 91 to 94, the middle of effective, which is essentially 80 to 82, 77 to 79, that is our target goal. So that would be, as a teacher, when you write your SLO, your target would be 80%, and that's based on how our students have performed over the last 4 years. So that'll apply to all teachers who develop their own assessments. That's how we'll also come up with the building level score for high school teachers. When you get down, the middle and elementary get a little more complicated. So what we have is science is graded on a proficiency scale levels 3 and 4. So that science scale is actually based on 4 years of test data and how our students have, how they have performed. So again, the scale is relatively the same. It's the same as the high school because our percentages have been the same as the average of the high school Regents exams. The scale score for the ELA and math, however, are not the same because we have new scales from the state. So what I did is I took our mean scale score for each grade level and have that mean scale score is between 13 and 14, which would be the target. Obviously, we would want that to be a little bit higher, but that's where we are right now based on the scales that the state has sent us. And so what we will do is we'll figure out the average for the ELA and math, the average for the science, and combine those so teachers get one total score for the building score, and that's what all teachers will get. Just so you know, I did some calculations based on this year's score, and the high school, the building score would have been, I think, around 17 or 18. I think it was 18 based on our June results this year, and our middle school and elementary schools would be around 15 or so. It's 15 or 16, I think, were the two scores, and you have to do it by building. So each elementary school will do it by building. You can't do it across the district. So that's kind of the APPR changes in a nutshell, and I'll open it up for questions people may have.
And that's despite the lower scores, they're still above our mean
Yeah,
in what we're looking at.
right. Because the science is very good, and the science helps offset the lower ELA and math scores. So when you combine those together, you end up
Yeah.
with, I think the scales between the buildings were 15 or 16 points. High school obviously is higher because conversion charts for Regents are easier.
Can I ask another question? What are you doing to encourage the staff to still be creative and do as they've always done, which is done excellent teaching, without focusing on this so much?
Well, it's funny, at the beginning of last year, I think people were we had gone through the observation piece, so that wasn't a big shift. But the whole scoring and testing and all of the pre-test, I think, really weighed people down. You know, pre-test, mid-course, end of course in a 10-week or 20-week course is a lot of testing. I mean, you're talking 3 days out of a 10-week segment that you're losing instructional time. So one of the things I think we recognize is that people were losing some of that time to do some of those more kind of innovative things by getting rid of those pre-tests and the mid-course assessment and using prior year test data. I think teachers feel a little more relaxed about it and feel like they have more time. You know, we also have the Common Core, which is very time intensive. So I think that some of the changes the committee made based on feedback we had from teachers will allow teachers to feel, one, like they have more time, so they can do some projects that maybe last year they felt they couldn't do, and give them that ability to feel like, okay, I don't have to worry about getting these tested in this certain amount of time. And it also frees up, you know, the supervisors and principals spent a ton of time doing bubble sheets and data, and not that we don't like to use data. I mean, I think we've come to a point that we recognize the importance of it, but it was minutia work, quite honestly, and was not valuable to teachers. You know, if you want to give a pre-test, you should be doing it to see what kids know and inform your instruction, and that's not really what this was about. This was about meeting a state mandate.
Jody, will 20% of the state still be content specific in a teacher's?
Yes, for
Evaluation.
for the individual, the SLO piece that they're required to do, that's content specific.
It is.
Yep.
Jody, is this just for this year's APPR, or is it open for discussion? I mean, I think to just make it an average, everybody gets the same score. I mean, for the teachers that excel, for them, they're being punished by the underperformers, really. I mean,
We actually talked about that by buildings. Buildings had discussions about that, and we also talked about that as a committee. And I think, you know, the 4 through 8 teachers are really the ones, say being penalized, but being penalized under the new system. They have I mean, you saw the results of the 3 through 8 assessments. I mean, 50% of our kids failed according to the state guidelines. Those teachers are getting scores from the state where all other teachers are allowed to create their own assessments. I mean, there's a lot less, there's a lot more room for teachers to have good scores when you're creating your own assessments and you know what actually is on those assessments than 4 through 8 teachers. So the rest of the faculty really felt like if those teachers are getting lower scores as a result of the state making these constant changes on state assessments, that we should all bear the burden. The other piece of that is there's not one discipline that doesn't require ELA skills, and a lot of math skills in many of those. So the faculty really felt that, and I agree with them and I support them, that having a building score makes it a little more equitable for everyone.
Well,
So
like you said, science is going to pull up ELA.
science will pull up ELA, but it doesn't pull it up drastically because those scale scores for ELA and math are not that high. I mean, you know, we're not trying to manipulate it. Those were our average ELA scores, and just like I put the average Regent scores in the middle, our average ELA and math scores are in the center of effective too, which those teachers in elementary and middle school will no doubtedly get a lower score than high school teachers will. Because until they change the Regents and make them more rigorous with the scoring, the high school teachers are always going to fare better under this system.
Jody, so the observation and evaluation, that's 60%. So what's that, which is observation, which is evaluation?
It's combined, actually. We do 4, minimally for probationary teachers, 4 classroom observations and 3 for probationary teachers throughout the year. Then there's a mid-year conference, and there's a domain they're evaluated on professional responsibilities, where teachers are required to provide evidence in those areas. And then they get evaluated at the end of the year by their supervisor and principal based on those classroom observations and the evidence that they've provided.
Okay.
So, Jody, any changes that you see coming down for this year in terms of staff development opportunities for teachers, whether it's building, across building, or a particular subjects, just so teachers can, let's say your building score was not quite what the group had hoped for, what kind of staff development might be in place for them to think about different teaching styles or methods or whatever to bring that up?
Most of our professional development last year and this year will center around the Common Core, most of it being ELA and math. We've been doing that for the last couple of years. We're going to continue with that. We had literacy camp this year, which a few weeks ago, which was heavily attended. We have over 100 teachers here. We're still waiting to see. One area we haven't set up any professional development for, but may need to, is if the state actually changes the science standards, which has been under discussion, but they haven't actually done anything, and that may change some of what we do in science. But until that happens, our primary focus is on ELA and math.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to commend the committee for the special ed modifications that they made, because that's so crucially important that these students be allowed to be successful in a framework that recognizes what they're up against rather than against some other standard. And I mean, my wife is a special ed teacher, and she told me about the pain the teachers feel and these kids taking these tests and not being able to cope with it. And so I think it's vitally important that we start recognizing that these modifications need to be made.
Right. Thanks. Anything else?
Any other questions? Thank you, Jody. The next, we have another presentation, facilities. Greg Nolte.
I'm leaving it alone.
Good evening. We're going to jump right into the presentation, but before we do, I'm going to just introduce some faces that you're going to see a lot over the next couple of years. Scott Bulleris, he's a senior project manager with Campus, Campus Construction Management Group, who basically are our eyes and our ears throughout this entire project that we're going to be invoking upon. And then we have Christian Nielsen. He's an architect with Ashley. He has been in and out of our buildings numerous times. He's here so much, he actually has an office in my office. So, and then, of course, we have Dan Ucrath, who is our senior main go-to guy, I guess, and he's going to be doing the presentation today. We have a little update for you.
Hi, everyone. I was just thinking, it was May the last time we presented together, and Scott and Ange Scatia was there as well. So I'll quickly go through. Our agenda for tonight was to give a design update on where we are, the development of the estimate that has taken place. Just looking at our timeline and where we are with that, and questions and comments can follow. So before we have this sort of same format of testing and fieldwork and phases and meetings that each time we do our presentation we'll go through. This time around, past several weeks, we've had PSI engineers. They're an environmental designer, and they've been going around testing the buildings. They've done all the sampling to look for any hazardous materials, look for asbestos, look for lead paint, PCB caulking, things of that nature. So they've identified that stuff. All of that will be designed and go into our SED submission. The field work, as Greg had mentioned, Christian is my right-hand man on this. We all have been out multiple times with multiple meetings in the field, measuring, confirming conditions. It's an ongoing process, and we'll probably keep doing more of that until we get as much info as we need. But that's been an ongoing process. This has been a very aggressive project for us because we have an end result, which is to get to SED, to get in time to go have construction next year. So we've been pushing very hard to get this working. Our phases now are going from design development into construction documents. And design development phase is much about these meetings, going over those 90-plus scope of works that we had in the bond, making sure we're meeting those requirements and looking at those things, meeting with the people who are involved, and then turning that into drawings and specs that we can ultimately give out to bidders so that they can build the project. So that's the design development going into construction documents. Our documents that we'll send to SED in September are construction documents. They'll have bid forms in them. They'll have all working drawings that contractors would be able to use once the project's approved. In the event that we need to put anything more into it, we can send an addendum to that submission, and we hope to get through and approve. Our OAC, we didn't want to use jargon or lingo, but OACM means Owner, Architect, Construction Manager meeting. So we've been having those regularly every 2 weeks. We had one today. We looked at where we're going to be with the SED submission and set up our meetings for the rest of the year. They won't be every 2 weeks, but they'll be regular meetings at least once a month. At those meetings, we go over all the scope items, any questions, make sure everyone's clear on what we're doing, or if there's any changes or nuances that we need to know about. So that's sort of where we are. We've been working furiously to get to this month and submission to SED soon. So any questions on that? I'll go on. One of the things several weeks ago, we're all about being proactive and transparent and making sure everyone knows and understands what we're doing, and we're welcome to questions of any sort. But several weeks ago, I was talking with Christian, and I said, you know, we have a lot of items on our list that may get some extra scrutiny from SED as they're reviewed. And Christian reached out to Tony Frandino, one of the reviewers there at State Ed Department, SED, and I told Christian, I said, you know, I'm not quite sure about what we're doing with the pit stair, and you know, we have a paint booth, we have all these things in here. Let's get that information to Tony at SED and get his opinion ahead of time. So if we're going down the right path, we know it. If we have to make a course adjustment, we can do that too. So a lot of those issues were at the middle school. We're doing a lot of invasive work at the middle school, a lot of improvements and enhancements and all that stuff. So we sent him a lot of documents. Christian talked with him on the phone, being very proactive, and actually it was very helpful in many of the directions we were going in, right, and he guided us to certain ways. I have a few images, that's part of that packet, a few images to show you where we were with that, and just to give you kind of an idea where we are. There was things about, I listed them there, the paint booth, kitchen equipment. Are we meeting code with some of these things? And as we work and develop over time with our consultants, we find out very specific items, like you need a three bay sink instead of a 2 to meet code. So we're handling all that stuff now, being very proactive, so when it gets to SED and in their hands, they can go, good, they got it covered. The other thing that I wanted to note is that we did have a kickoff meeting with capital markets advisors. I'd like to get them involved early, as soon as we know we have a financial advisor in the project, because getting proactive and set up for where our finances are going to be in the future is very important. It's critical to make sure our funding paths are going the right direction. We maximize the aidability of our project. We know some of it's not aided, but we want to make sure everything's covered and accounted for, and try to do that on a very regular basis as well, so everyone's up to speed. Any questions? I'll go to the next one. I think what we have here, and my pointer works, I have a few images from the middle school. One of the, let's get us oriented. This blob down here is an overall plan of the middle school, and B is the main old front classic entrance. And if you go around the back where the bridge is, down below the bridge is the sort of maintenance storage area. One of the projects we have is to create a yard storage room there for some equipment. And we just worked out some of the details, especially with your fire inspector as well in other buildings, to make sure we're meeting the code requirements of having fire-rated partitions and keeping that room separate from having access through it by staff. So we were going to introduce a new door here somewhere, and we finally located it along the side, that's a double door right there. And this solid dark line is our fire-rated partition. And we've actually set the distance that we need to store all the equipment in. But it's important to make sure, are we meeting the code here? Are we meeting all the fire-rated issues there? And we worked that out with SED, and that worked out well. On the other side of the building, around the corner as you come through the drop-off loop here, is where we're adding on a small pool room addition for filter, storage, all those kind of things. We worked out with SCD the kind of fire rating that we needed and fire separation. We worked out some logistics of getting in and out of the space. There's a required exit that we didn't want to block, but we could use to access this new room. What this does is get a lot of the pallets that had the chlorine out of that mower storage room, the previous slide, over into here where it should be near the pool. It makes a lot of sense. So we really took that idea from the bond and kind of cleaned it up, enhanced it, and made it really function well for the purpose that was originally designated. The one that worried me the most that we wanted to get involved with SCD is the egress out of the pit in the front. This is sort of a 3D image right here, and there's the big tall gym windows. And this is a plan image. In reality, you have a door with stairs coming up and a door with stairs coming up. We tried to go with the most utilitarian, simplest, smallest answer we could.
Cheapest.
Yeah, and then and then, we double checked because we wanted to make sure. This is an old building, 30s-ish vintage, and the way the state looks at it is, the way it was built back then, it met code. So please don't mess it up too much, or we will have to, trigger you bringing a whole bunch of other things up to code. So we worked out a solution to remove one of those stairs, the worst one, by the entrance, and then reconstruct a new stair on the other side. We're still working out the finer points of it, of how it will look. We have to save some things for the next presentation so you can see it. But this is where we are, and we're answering those, the needs of getting this enclosed, maintainable, and safe.
I think one of the biggest items with this is the aesthetics of this. We didn't want something that's going to stand out. We're trying to preserve the character of the front of the school, so we're just trying to sneak this in there without a lot of
Yeah.
vinyl siding.
No
Can I
vinyl
ask
siding.
you a question about that slide?
Yes.
So it looks like it's the hall, you go down a hallway and then come out that entrance, correct?
Correct, yes.
And so the one that's being blocked off is the really one that's falling apart that comes out, there's the main building entrance and there's one
Correct.
that's being, so you actually have to come down the hallway and out.
Right.
There, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. And what's great about, we almost got these things pre-approved by SCD. So, and Christian actually was at Albany at the State Ed Department this afternoon before a meeting, and we did find out the person we've been talking to is going to be the reviewer of our stuff. So it was a win-win for us.
Will that potentially help in the timeline?
Potentially, yes. Yep.
Sorry, I won't jump.
Yep. Okay. We wanted to show just a little image of, this is the transportation center. At the end of the building, the drive-through car wash is over here, and the big parking lot's over here. This is the solution we've added on to the end of that for what the bond item calls a paint booth, but is more or less a service bay for painting of the buses. So that becomes a small addition at the end of the building here, and you can see it's sort of a concrete block sort of matching the existing stuff here. The new garage door out at this side. We're being very sensitive to how we have to work with the asphalt and the parking and all that around there. So this is a solution that we're at. All of these are a snapshot in time right now. But these are the solutions that we have and that the estimate has been developed from.
This paint booth, that will meet all OSHA compliance and help with
Yes,
the-
that was a big part of going through what chemicals they're going to have, what kind of paints they're going to have, the equipment that's in there, all those.
As well as storage of those?
Yes, the storage, everything. So that includes that, as well as keeping it flexible enough so that it's not always, that it doesn't always need to be just a paint booth if you need to do something else in there.
Will you be losing any parking with that addition?
Do we lose any parking? We lose long bus parking, but we would still maintain about 7 or 8 car parking. Of course, we're doing the entire paving there and paving over where it's gravel, so we have the opportunity to restripe and make sure that we don't lose any. We're not going to lose any bus parking, but we want to make sure everything's adjusted in there. So we do have that, thank goodness, we have that flexibility to restripe and reline everything. It's a great question. And then lastly, our pole barn storage building at O&M. Simple pole barn. This is just an image of it. Open on one side for that kind of salt and other storage, and enclosed the rest of it. Not much to talk about, but we thought we'd show you how that's coming.
Is that on a separate part of the property?
The wetlands that we created,
Yeah.
going out in the back.
Yeah.
Little peninsula there.
So again, like I said, a snapshot in time. We submitted to campus, our construction manager, our design documents, our design development phase. I guess we would call them approximately 50% of our construction documents, our bid documents. Some are almost 100% done, some are less, but probably on average about 50% or so. What happened was, it's an interesting process. There's 85 pages of backup that belong to this. But what as you can see there, we've divided up and retotaled everything of total construction estimate. That's everything it takes to build what we're going to do. The construction contingency is there for any unknowns or any no choice kind of change orders if we find something that shouldn't be there during demolition. That gives us a total cost of $17,602,000. We have incidental costs, and my next slide kind of shows you what the difference is between these costs of $2,476,000. What's nice is we get to the $20,079,000, which, as you can see, is less than the bond amount. So we do have a little play there. As we were developing this design development estimate, we were finding that we were slightly over, kind of over by $900 and something thousand. As we refine and hone and look into why it was that and answer some questions, which is the natural process that we go through with the construction manager, we answered those questions, we got it down to right where we wanted to be, and everyone felt comfortable that this is a good snapshot in time of where we are. So we've taken care of all the items, whether they're some are more or some are less. They all fit into the budget. We kind of made a little correction on the Ellesmere and Glenmont playgrounds. At first, the estimator was calculating the entire cost to do those playgrounds without any knowledge that there are donations coming in to help pay for that. So he did the estimate, and we had to show that as below the line as credits towards that sum. So we kind of get to around $100,000 to the good for the regular estimate, and up to $200,000 coming in to help support the playground work. So that's how this, and hopefully I explained it okay, that's how this chart works.
Yeah, and just so that the board knows, when I visited Glenmont today, I believe they're up to already about $45,000 in roughly a very short time, and a major fundraiser is coming up. For them, I think September 21st is the Glenmont Family Fun Days. So, you know, on behalf of Ellesmere and Glenmont, they are living up to their expectations, and we appreciate that. One of the things I have to ask a question, Scott, with campus, obviously you do a lot of the estimating and working in conjunction. Am I to assume that this design development estimate is sort of our first estimate, the true cost, not like what we were working on when we're in the conception phase of any bond project? These are hard and fast numbers with the information that you have right now. Okay.
And like Dan said, I mean, we may be over 100,000 here, we're under 100,000 over here, we just have to work together to try, so we don't literally steal from Peter to pay Paul, we want it all to be split out the way it's supposed to be. That's what we're pulling and moving money from.
And is this also taken into consideration future bidding time, or just what it would be if we were on a conservative bid or an aggressive bid schedule, or where are you at?
This is taken care of at bidding time right now, we're trying to calculate for what it's gonna be this next spring.
Okay.
And we have like 3 estimators, that's all they do. Every day is crunch these numbers, and they talk with the steel suppliers, the electrical suppliers, they find out if the price is going up 2 cents a pound or down 2 cents. They keep track of it very closely, and they've been very good input so far in all the projects I've been on.
And so that's briefly the bullet points for what makes up the hard costs or what it takes to build what we're doing. Design contingency right now is down to, it was around 8 or 9% when we started. It's down to about 1.5%, and we're still holding a little bit there just in case the SED review comes back with, you know, you may want to add this or do that before they approve it. So that's where we're holding a very small amount. Construction contingency still, I believe, is at 10% or 9%? 9. And then our escalation factors in there, what you just said. The incidental or soft costs, as we call them, are the costs that it takes to actually do this stuff and see it through. So you have the fees, you have the testing, the monitoring is a big one, furniture, fixture, equipment, those things. Legal fees, insurance, bond costs, all of those need to be included, and they are. And we also have printing and reproductions as well. So all of that makes up our 20 million plus number. Our next thing is we tried to do a bullet to show you where we are with our timeline. We are on target for basically 2 weeks from now to get our submission to SED. I even gave Greg some paperwork for signatures that superintendent and board president will need to take care of. We're pushing for this September because we're still hearing it's going to take months and months to get reviewed at SED. So that's why I wanted to be proactive and get any questionable stuff on the table first and get it settled. But our goal is to have our review done and ready for a 2014 construction season. And that's our big goal. Our efforts right now, we're still continuing, as Scott said, to look at what we have, refine and hone where we are. We want to look at what is it, how are we going to bid this out? Are we going to have 5, 7 separate prime contracts doing this? How are we going to, what did we get to? 7? Okay. Settled with 7. We're looking at what are we doing in 2014 versus 2015. In our project description forms, we try to divide up the middle school and high school. Both have huge amounts of work going on. So we're looking at what could be completed in 2014 all the way up to the end of 2014. So then we could do our substantial completion certificate and start the aid running right away as soon as we can. So we're looking at that. We're looking at what can we take. We had a discussion today. What can we take offline in the summer? How do we do the tennis courts? How do we do the fields and the lights for the fields and all those things? All of those are going together in our logistics and planning. We will put a preliminary one together in 2 weeks for SED when we submit. But we're still working on that. We still have some months' time to get it all together, and we'll have to meet with, athletic director and PE people and all that to make sure we can do something and then get it complete in those summers, whenever. So that is pretty much where we are. We'll leave this point open for any questions or discussions or clarifications.
Dan, does everything in the bond project have to have SED approval? Is there anything we can move forward with without SED approval and start some of it?
The short answer is no. Everything, the way they do it is everything gets approved at once. So we have 10 buildings. They will go through and approve all of them as one whole thing because it's one bond amount that we're working with, so that's why they do it.
Actually, certain types of projects like playgrounds,
Right.
we could get approval on that, but then we don't get the aid.
But that would what? I'm sorry. You wouldn't get the aid, okay.
How does the possibility of an energy performance contract affect submission to state ed? I mean, would that go in along?
An under 3-minute update after this, I can do it now, regarding energy performance.
I think it's a great segue.
That's a beautiful segue. Did you?
No,
Just so I wanted to give you an update. I believe that all of you received in a board packet August 26th update from ECG. ECG is our energy performance consultants, and they're the ones who are going to help us design the project and basically select an ESCO, who is an energy service company, and that's what we're trying to go through for an energy performance contract. Okay, so EPC, ECG, and ESCOs. Remember those, all right?
ESCO.
real quick, as everybody knows, we started selecting and this process back at the beginning of 2013. We had a detailed RFP, request for proposals, that went out to the community, the ESCO community, okay? And we received 5 proposals. And these proposals were in 3 4-inch binders, okay, from the various ESCOs. The Facilities Committee at the beginning of June met with the 5. We interviewed the 5, and that committee narrowed it down to 3, okay? From there, O&M and ECG took their proposals, got much more involved, asked them some very, very specific questions. Those companies responded in writing back to us, and their responses basically, we narrowed it down to 2 companies, okay? And we have those responses on file. So the next step, I believe, is that we were going to do interviews before the full board. I don't know if a date has been set, either Wednesday, Thursday, next.
We have established that the date will be on September 11th. We will need to put that out, and also I'll need the board just before the end of this evening to make an agreement that we are going to be having a special board meeting for that night for the purpose of entering into executive session to conduct professional service interviews in regards to the energy performance contract.
Okay, and then those interviews will pretty much consist of about a 45-minute presentation from the 2 ESCOs, going over their energy measures, basically the energy work that they want to do in this district. We'll ask them questions about that. We might ask them financial questions. We might ask them some questions on their guarantee. And then hopefully the board will be able to make a decision and possibly at the next board meeting appoint an ESCO for us. And then from that point, the ESCOs will come in, or the ESCO will come in and do a 2 to 3 month, what they call a comprehensive energy audit, and really create the actual scope of what we want, and that will be presented to the board for your acceptance. And then from there, if the board accepts that, then basically ECG, the engineer, will go and design it, and then we submit to SED, and then we wait 6 months for them to review.
And that will be a separate project. It's not tied together, although it still has to go through a variety of checkpoints.
So we talked a little bit, Lynn, about this today, that we are going to have hopefully some work during the summer of 2014. I do not expect any energy performance work, only because of the process and how long we're going to have to wait for SED. But there will be a time that we have our bond work and the energy performance work going at the same time, which will have to be coordinated with our construction manager and our architect to make sure that nobody's getting in anybody's way.
Greg, I have a question. It's been my experience, interviewing the architects and the energy managers, the screening, they provide material to the committee. And I'm not sure if you would anticipate that the 2 companies would provide, I mean, it's a book, of stuff. And if they would, if it's possible for us to get that at least a day in advance. I mean, because I find myself trying to listen and looking at all the nice stuff they provide us, but I'm not sure if we can get that in advance.
We actually have extra binders.
Well, what I think Dr. Wojcicki is mentioning that anything that they're going to give us in a presentation, because you'll be able to set up the schedule tomorrow.
Okay.
If they are going to give us a PowerPoint presentation or anything, they must provide it at least a minimum of 36 hours prior to the interview.
Okay.
That would be helpful to have. And then if for folks who weren't, I'm not sure if I still have my copies, but
Yeah.
If people want like the big presentation things from the previous
Yeah.
one, that'd be great. But that was what I was
Yeah,
asking.
if they could provide it electronically, that would help for dissemination.
Thank you.
Other questions, either energy performance or capital construction? You're good on the playgrounds?
I think I finally get it, and if not, it's okay. I mean, it's, well, let me ask you a question about playgrounds, actually. So, not your numbers, but let's say the PTAs have raised, for example, I'm not sure what Ellesmere goal is, but let's say they've met it, let's say it's.
Raised about 80,000, I believe.
Yeah, so let's say they have that. And I'm not sure, I kind of hear things out in the community. Let's say they want to go, can they go ahead with their 80,000 and buy stuff and install it, or should they, is there an agreement that they're waiting for this to go through?
Greg, I'll help you on that.
No.
When we are working with state ed, this is the state's property. They cannot just go ahead.
Okay.
It is not wise, and that has been explained to both of the groups. We will not risk the aid nor the impetus of that if something goes wrong and state ed is not happy, it slows down our entire project. Once we entered into the project, it becomes a project. We need to make sure we're above board with state ed so that it funnels the right way, the timelines, and we're not dealing with liability issues, donation issues, because they will really donate the money and the concept, and then the concept is what is working on with state ed. But we don't want their concept, and then all of a sudden state ed says you can't have that, and then we have a sort of a chicken and egg scenario with each of the playgrounds.
Okay,
So
great.
I would not advise it. Yes, you could do it in this situation, and my construction background, I'm sure the CM as well as the architect, and I think Greg would concur, it is not recommended.
Okay, I'm not saying they would do it, but because I was the playground director at Ellesmere back then, and I know they raised money and they installed swings. So technically speaking, they could, but basically, it looks like they're gonna donate the money, that goes into the pot with the bond money for a total project that becomes part of
Right.
this bond
See,
project.
officially at that time, they raised the money, they donated even the swings to the district. The board, the superintendent would have to bring that recommendation forward, the board would have to approve it, and then they could. As a superintendent dealing with state ed, I would not bring that recommendation forward.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else for? Well, thank you, Dan, Scott, Christian, and Greg. Okay.
Oh, I
Moving-
can't see, just a second, I'm trying. Can anybody see the X's up there? There it is.
Well, moving on to item number 7 on the agenda. At this point, if there's anybody in the audience who would like to talk, to address the board on any specific agenda item, now would be the time. Okay. Huh? 7.
minutes.
It's 7.
The agendas are back there.
Oh, okay. If you could state your name.
Hi, I'm Cindy Ferrari with the Bethlehem Healthy Kids Committee. So I see that you'll be discussing the approval of food service department bids for this upcoming school year. And as I look over the items that will be included, I see vending machine products, snack foods, coffee products, and baked goods. And so I just wanted to take this time to express my concerns with what is being bought. And I obviously haven't seen the list of what's being bought. I just, in general, wanted to express my concerns. I wanted to state that if there was a strong wellness policy, and if there were strong nutrition standards in the absence of being involved with the federal meal program at the high school, I would not have those concerns. And I just wanted to let you all know that we will connect with Paul, as you suggested, and the nutrition committee with resources and a presentation. I'm been in contact with Paul, of course, over the years, because it's what I do for my job. And he's always very receptive, and so I know that will continue. And just wanted to state that we look forward to a continued involvement with the coordinated school health team, where I know that the wellness policy will be addressed. And I know we looked into this last year, and I'm unsure what it looks like this year, but it definitely is ideal to have a Board of Education member on the coordinated school health team. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item number 8, appointment of officer, deputy treasurer. It is recommended that we appoint Brittany Barrett as deputy treasurer effective October 7th, 2013, at no additional salary. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item number 9, finance. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items, A through D. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
That's a first and a second. Any discussion? Yes.
Yeah, I actually, and I raised this in an email to the board earlier, but I also, when I was reviewing the list of the items available through the contracts for the snack foods and the coffee products, I mean, it really jumped out at me as a parent of 4, 2 coming to the high school. I have a 13-year-old starting on Monday. I mean, he's a young freshman, but he's not unlike any other freshman boy who's going to be very attracted to a lot of the items there. And I think it's worth taking another look at kind of what's on the list, because a lot of it, and I'm the kind of parent that is not particularly militant about my choice of snack foods, but I think I'm probably pretty typical. I buy a lot of snacks in my household, and there was a lot of stuff on that list that I wouldn't buy for my house, and I'm not really the snack food Nazi household. So I just think we can probably do a better job and take another look at that and, offer some temperance maybe of some of the stuff that was on there. And, quite honestly, I guess I hadn't realized the availability of all not just the cafe, the coffee drinks, but there's an awful lot, there's syrups to make the coffee taste better. I don't know about you, but a 13-year-old is going to go right to that cafe and order a nice caramel latte because, he thinks that's fun. And I'm sure whichever class he has that next period is going to be not very appreciative of the fact that he had that caramel latte or whatever that was served up. So I just think that, as you look through, and, it struck me as I was reviewing the materials, I think we could probably look at it again with a little keener eye, and I would make that suggestion.
One of the things, and I'll also ask Judy to pipe in, these are bid lists, so one of the things is you see everything that's on that bid list. It does not mean that we purchase everything on that bid
Right.
list. In other words, we lock in the price. One of the major purchases was a bid item for food service products that came in much earlier, and that's already been approved. So when taken in the context of one list, as if we were buying just that, yeah, it wouldn't look good. This
Okay.
provides the school and the business to lock in its price depending on what they do. And that is one of the goals of Mr. Franchini, as well as the board having the discussion earlier in regards to the fact that we have a couple problems that we'll be watching, and that is the fact that these beverages as well come in from outside.
Right.
And we have no control of what's actually in the product. It doesn't mean that there's a right way or a wrong way, but an ounce of temperance as well as a discussion through the food service director and how we're going to develop that $200,000 shortfall. This is one of the avenues, doesn't mean it's the whole avenue, but that's what that committee will be
Right.
charged with trying to work on
Yeah.
to help Mr. Franchini to have potential options. Things that really work, he's all for.
Yeah.
Things that don't work, no matter what, he has to operate a balanced
Right.
program.
No,
that
that's-
ends. So just so that
Yeah.
the board knows, that's a list. It doesn't mean it's the end-all, be-all list.
So we're not going to have 8 different kinds of Pop-Tarts.
It doesn't necessarily mean that, correct.
They sell
Candy.
Pop-Tarts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's one of the things we want to be aware of. This is our procedural purchasing requirement.
Well,
that
and
we
I
go
think
through.
that's fantastic. I'm happy to hear that, and I would volunteer my own time to be a board participant of that, because I do think that, these kids spend $4 down at Perfect Blend for a smoothie that's yogurt and fruit, and, not that they're not also attracted to other snacks and stuff, but there is a way to offer things that would get us to where we need to go with the fiscal end of things, but also, kids will go for, and we all see it in our own houses, and, there's little tricks that we do to manipulate that, but I think it's obviously a big concern of the community, and it's also, I think, as parents, we all face that every single day in our own kitchens.
And I think,
cupboards.
just so that you know, Ms. Cunningham, Mr. Franchini and I sat down today. He is going to be putting out a letter so that parents have the ultimate say, no matter what. Even if we offer it, parents have a
Right. No, I
tool.
realize
So
that.
I think we're going to do a little more publication of that and get that out.
That's a good
So
idea.
that first at the high school, but it's also across
Yeah,
the
it
school
is.
district. So he's working on those dynamics, and I think that's where
That's great.
the position over the next year will help guide in some of those
Is
decisions.
that the meal card that you can?
Where they can sign in, but they can also restrict students from
Right.
specific
from
purchases.
purchasing certain things?
Yeah.
I have a couple questions. Well, first of all, when did you send that email?
Yeah, I
Because
was
I'm
gonna
not
say,
sure
I
I
didn't see an
I
email.
saw it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that makes
Um,
me concerned that I
The
didn't.
email came out late
Late in
earlier
the day,
today.
late in the day.
Okay, so maybe
Yeah.
I didn't check
Just
my email
indicating that
after,
she would
yeah.
be posing some
Right.
Okay, good, good,
right.
good.
Yes.
So, because I thought maybe I had
Well,
missed
thank
something.
you for not ignoring me.
Yeah, no, I didn't see it either,
No,
Joanne.
No, it's late in the day.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
got it,
was
got it. I just
reading
want to make
through
sure
a lot
that the
of,
system was working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second of all is, what's not on that list is the fruit and vegetable bids. Because I know I had raised that too. I said the list
Yeah.
kind of jumps out at you. And you said that, I would imagine that fruit is going to be offered as a snack, and that's just part of a separate bid that
Yes.
has it.
Yeah.
Do a very nice mixed fruit cup. That is one of the big sellers as well. All of the fruit and the meats and all of the other non-snack food items has already been bid out. That was part of the organizational meeting where the board approved our participation in the BOCES bid, where multiple districts are securing those types of items. So that's really the lion's share of the food that is offered, is through the BOCES bid.
Okay.
And, the one other thing I would say is, I know that the question about caffeinated beverages came up, and I know that I checked in with a couple of board members, and the discussion I had outside of a board, I guess we're not supposed to do it, but I mean, I said, hey, Mike, hey, Diane, I think I would, that caffeinated thing kind of resonates with me, and then through discussion with them, I realized, well, I can temper my own opinion, and I just, we have to have a lot of the discussion, I think, here sometimes at the table, because I know when they said, well, what if we don't sell it, but are we supposed to check the cups if people bringing things in? And what kind of dilemma does that produce for the staff here? And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I think as we wrestle with some of these issues, it's great to raise it here so that we can all chime in and the public can say, oh yeah, we see that they're having a good discussion, and that I can say, okay, now I understand that. Although the concern about the caffeinated beverage resonated with me initially, I understand now in a more complex way some of the issues, and so I'm willing to go along with it, so.
No, I imagine in the next couple of weeks, we will be sending out our invitation letters to the constituency groups that we've mentioned, give them a time to formulate, and then Mr. Franchini will be putting together the committee. And the only addition that I'm going to make to the committee is one teacher, because I think we need to make sure that, because the teachers do avail themselves of different things at each of the schools, we also need to make sure that we're hearing from all avenues there, so.
And Joanne, were you saying you wanted to be on that committee? Were you volunteering to be?
yeah, I would
That's what
love
I thought I
to.
heard.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would love to, or, I'm sure there are other board members that might be interested, so.
Any other discussion? No. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item number 10, professional personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following instructional staff action, items A through O.
So moved.
That's a first. Second. Any discussion?
Are we now covered for everything, Chinese, biology, everything?
Well, we still have a
Deans.
few, no, we still have a few teaching positions that we need to fill that are like replacement positions, or we had the fax teacher who resigned and we just got someone today, so they'll start as subs, but all the positions are filled. But they all haven't been appointed yet because some of them were literally,
Right.
Within the
I was
last
because
day
we
or
haven't
two.
seen all of that.
Right,
Right,
correct.
including the deans?
no, deans haven't been filled. Or-
I had a question too, because I met somebody this morning, but she's not on here, so is that like a sub then?
Probably starting as a sub.
Okay.
If they haven't met with me yet, then they would be starting as a sub at this
Okay.
point.
And then I also just had a question on the item N, like the AP coordinator, head proctor. It's like 2.5% of fees or $250, whichever is higher. What do they just proctor the AP?
No, they coordinate all the testing. So they actually set up, they order the testing, they make sure that all the locations are secure, that they make sure that all of the, measures that are in place for security are in place, and then they're the ones who coordinate the results, getting them back and getting them out to the supervisors.
Okay, and then the 2.5% is of the students who take the test? Like, I guess I just didn't.
Of the fees that we take it for all the exams that we administer.
Gotcha.
I just want to recognize, both the loss of Brian Schaefer, who he's only been here for a year, but I got to know him through the hiring process and just seeing him in the halls, and really appreciate Ms. Meltzer for her number of years of service
They're
here.
making very good career moves in their
I
path in
imagine.
administration. So
I'm happy for them, you know, I would imagine that. a
That's
loss
part
for
of our
us.
job to
That's right, mentor people up.
encourage people to move forward or go.
Yep.
Hate to see people go. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, and we will be trying to fill those positions this Friday, or shortly thereafter. So there will be as minimal time as possible.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item number 11, support personnel.
So
Is-
moved.
Okay, didn't even have a chance to read it.
He paused for a second.
Second.
That's a first and a second. Any discussion on that item? No. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item number 12, correspondence for action. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following correspondence action, item A through C.
So moved.
That's a first.
Second.
Is that a second, Lynn?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item number 13. At this point, is there any, anyone from the public that wants to speak on a non-agenda
Oh,
item?
no, we have to policies. Did we approve the
No,
policies?
you've already
That was
done
it.
it.
Oh, we did that? All right, sorry.
You seconded it.
No, I didn't realize the policies were approved.
I couldn't move the screen that fast. I'm sorry.
Okay, and there being none, future meetings, Wednesday, September 18th, October 2nd, October 6th, regular board meetings.
And September 11th.
We will be having the September 11th, again, if you'd let me. September 11th, as Dr. Douglas mentioned, we will need to have an executive session to interview the performance energy.
And no action will be taken.
Right.
And that's at 6 PM?
Right
6.
now, tentatively
Oh.
6, but the schedule will be coming out most likely tomorrow.
Because
Okay.
don't we need some time to go over questions?
Yes.
So, and any action item would be taken in public at a subsequent
Correct.
meeting.
So I'm sorry, that's 6? It starts at 6?
Roughly start, let's look at the start time at 6.
Okay.
Again, we'll work like we've done similar.
Can I have a motion to go back into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
That's a first and a second. Well,
Will any action be taken after this executive session for the public?
No, there will not be any action after the executive session. What?
Purpose of discussion?
Oh, the purpose is to continue contractual discussions. So,
I think you said that at the beginning of the meeting, too.
yeah,
Do you need a movement?
okay.
We just-
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Carries. We'll go.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.